Hello everyone, thanks for joining me in this video. Wider jubilation as Nnamdi Kanu petition to the United States President Donald Trump gains immediate and urgent acknowledgement. It is quite interesting as a victory of the century for the Biafran people and the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu, as his recent letter or petition to the United States government under the supervision of Donald Trump gains acknowledgement, and delegations has been mobilized by the United States government to pay a visit to the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra in the DSS dungeon, which defies every protocol by the DSS operatives, and eventually they're going to have an independent interactions and deliberations on the factored discussions and issues he have raised in that particular letter or petition to the United States government under Donald Trump. Honestly, Nnamdi Kanu, in most recent days, have written a letter, well itemized and articulated letter, expressing his pain, frustration, persecutions, and perceived injustice, most pronouncedly the Judo-Christian population of the Eastern region that are facing, of course, existential threats. And he has demanded that the government of U.S. should set up an independent panel of inquiry to investigate the perpetrators of this heinous crime, that a jihad has been declared against the Judo-Christian population of the Eastern region with the conspiracy of certain elements within the corridor of power. He has demanded that the Donald Trump administration to set up a panel of inquiry to unravel, of course, those behind this and possibly bring them to justice. Also, in part of his concerns raised or demand is that an independent referendum should be conducted and supervised by the United States of America to protect the right of the Biafrans to self-determination as is being captured in the United Nations Conventions and Charter, that the self-determination is the right and inalienable right of any group of persons to who felt threatened, existential threat within a society or a contraction, just as what we are seeing within Nigeria today. So the implication of this urgent acknowledgement and move taken by the United States will definitely alter the entire, of course, political atmosphere and configuration of the Nigerian state. Upon this meeting, eventually, Nnamdi Kanu will have enough time to download more of what he could not pen down in those letters. It is quite interesting, and after this meeting, eventually, Nigeria will not remain the same, and he perceived injustice despite the ruling by an appellate court of law. The appeal court within the Nigerian legal jurisprudence have dismissed every count charges against Nnamdi Kanu, bordering on treason, terrorism, and the rest of them, citing that they lack the merit. The prosecuting counsel could not argue their case beyond reasonable doubt or defend the alleged claims, accusation against Nnamdi Kanu on the basis for which it was squashed and dismissed. And Nnamdi Kanu's innocency was upheld. He was discharged and acquitted by an appellate court of law of competent jurisdiction, citing that his extraordinary rendition was illegal. That was the position, the ruling of the appeal court. And appeal court is superior to the lower courts, the high court. So there is no way such case could be set aside. Nnamdi Kanu has also filed a motion on appeal to stop the supposed scheduled judgment slated by James Omotosho on the 20th of this month, citing that he doubts the sincerity and credibility of James Omotoso to dispense the cause of justice. If he have turned down over 8 prayers made before the courts of James Omotoso to determine the jurisdictional competence of Nigeria or James Omotoso court to stand trial for him to be tried in the first instance and to establish the law for which he is being accused or to have violated, which eventually was discovered that it was a repealed law, a dead law that is not existent. It is quite disturbing development as Nnamdi Kanu clearly raised alarm that there is a conspiracy to illegally, unlawfully convict him of such, and eventually have taken his pen to write to the US President Donald Trump, citing all those instances and gross violations of his fundamental rights. I know the United States government and its council will have reviewed these letters and have expressed deep concern and interest to unravel what exactly is going on within the Nigerian legal system. Already there is an impending, of course, queries and suspicions about the indefinite corruption within the Nigerian legal or judicial system and the rest of them. And raising this tempo is the current happenings, allegation of Christian genocide in Nigeria. Definitely after this meeting, that might possibly be the end of Nigeria or something possibly dramatic will change. Nnamdi Kanu is coming out of the DSN dungeon, a free man, and possibly his demand for referendum will definitely be upheld, as that is the right of the people. It is quite interesting, honestly. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to this channel. If you're watching us for the first time, turn on the notification button so that you can get a video once it's been uploaded. Just relax, stay tuned as we continue on this deliberation. It is an interesting moment to watch. What is the implication of these delegations and the acknowledgement of the letter written to the United States President Donald Trump by the leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, Nnamdi Kanu? You know, the Biafran people in most recent years has renewed their quest, their agitation for the restoration of the lost sovereign state of Biafra between 1967 to 1970, citing the gross injustice, violations, intimidation, humiliations, and deliberate intention to subjugate the regions. You see, the most pitiable regions of the Nigerian state is the eastern region. After surviving such holocaust, such genocidal war from 1967 to 1970, of course, we have it in history and record that several international communities supported the Nigerian government against the rights of the Biafran people to self-determination. They were clamped down, the conspiracy and the deceptive propaganda sailed out there, of course, and some certain vested interests who came for their personal and selfish interests do not they have a recourse offer their contribution to the annihilation of over 5 million people. The likes of Russia, China, and the rest of the world, of course, turned their back against the cry, the enemies, and the oppression of the Biafran people. And which of recent, one of the NATO representatives or commanders or chiefs, of course, acknowledged the conspiracy of the European nations and the Western world against the Biafran state, and today have acknowledged to support the Biafran people in their quest to exit Nigeria. It is a welcome development, and this will no longer be denied. It is no longer a propaganda. Yes, The Australian NATO chief has acknowledged the Biafran nation. So that should not be considered as a propaganda. It is before the public domain, and I've called on other NATO member states to also do the same. What does that mean? If the Australian NATO chief has endorsed Biafra, it means Australia has acknowledged the sovereign state of Biafra, the restoration of the sovereign state of Biafra. And I strongly believe, even in 1967 to 1970, that African countries that also acknowledged and supported the cause of Biafra, not let alone at this particular time when everything is shifting, when there is dynamic shift of events with the current realities, insecurity here and there. Look at how the terrorists, the Islamic State of West African province, are ravaging the entire northern regions, holding the Nigerian military to hostage, to ransom, executing them, tying them up and executing them, blowing them up. It is quite a very disturbing development that shows you that the Nigeria they think was one already has been vulcanized. Look at what the ambush laid against the military in most recent time, demanding the total eviction of the Nigerian presence military within those terrains that have declared an Islamic state. They have hosted their flag, making laws, collecting taxes from the supposed citizens of Nigeria, and the government is watching helplessly. It is rather unfortunate. These current realities, of course, will redefine the continued existence of Nigeria. Whether Nigeria will continue or not will be based on this the very development that is unfolding, because many things are being factored. Mazen Nnamdi Kanu was very articulate and deliberate in his submissions. He was able to touch several issues of concern that have been begging for answer and which is before the public domain, international, of course, domain, not just local. You see, in 1967 to 1970, the Biafran cause appears to be just covered up by the British BBC propaganda. Look at what the BBCs are doing. They have been known for this cruelty and deception, and media deception and propaganda. Look at, immediately Donald Trump had to slam the 1 billion or express his intention to slam the 1 billion suit. Look at how they are shaking, $1 billion. They are shaking and begging on their knees, because this has been what they have been doing against the Biafran people since the war, or prior to the war, the genocidal war. And they think they can continue to do that and get away with that. If I were to be or to advise Donald Trump, I would have at least make it $5 billion US dollars. Let them pay through their nose to remind them of the conspiracy against the genocide that took the life of 5 million Biafrans and the rest of them. So I hope that Donald Trump will not reconsider stepping down such decisions. Let him go ahead, of course, to slam them. That's $1 billion suit. For me, he would have reviewed it upwards. Possibly that would be the total collapse of BBC in their wickedness and impunity against humanity. It's sort of unfortunate. Now, the medias are not capturing this development because it is a deadly blow dealt on the enemies of Mazen Nnamdi Kanu and the Biafran people at large. So this step is commendable, and the outcome of this will definitely silence the critics and the enemies of the Biafran people. It is no longer business as usual, as some people always maintain, that the Biafrans of this generation are not the Biafrans of yesteryears, honestly. And with the advent of technology and dissemination of information, you can see how, with all ease and clarity, how Mazen Nnamdi Kanu was able to convey his grievances, his frustrations and disappointment over his current ordeal, which the BBC could no longer manipulate. You see, unlike in the olden days, they could have their way to push certain narratives which they want to push to the Western world, and they will buy into it. But before the other Western world realizes the truth, several people has gone down, and the starvations and the rest of them was used as a weapon, which indeed was a war crime, indeed, to starve children and defenseless population of the Biafran people. It is not going to repeat again. In fact, there may not be any need for another war before the needful could be done. With these delegations and acknowledgement of the letter to Donald Trump, American president, the most powerful president in the world today, and the highest defender of human democracy, of human dignity, and the rule of law. Of course, among which were the rights of people to self-determination. Even the Shetima, the vice president at the recent concluded United Nations General Assembly, affirms that the right to self-determination is an inalienable right that cannot be seized or usurped by any state, that the people deserve the right to self-determination, citing his support, during his support for the Palestinians, not knowing that even the Biafrans are also part of an integral system, global system that also have access to this inalienable right. So, by so doing, shooting himself on the leg, and that will not stand. Such level of injustice or perceived continued persecution of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu will not stand. And people have rumored that there is an undercover or conspiracy to swiftly pronounce sentence or judgments against Nnamdi Kanu and eventually imprison him. On what basis do you base your judgment? That is very clear. You say you are condemning somebody. Even an appeal court, the highest court, more higher than the lower court, high court. What is high court compared to the verdict of the appeal court? That you want to set aside or contravene the position of the appeal court, which is subsisted. There has not been any other higher court that have suspended that or proven otherwise. They upheld that the extraordinary rendition of Nnamdi Kanu was illegal, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. You can't benefit from your illegality. So for James Omoto, so is caught up in that web, and the international communities are now observing closely. International lawyers and, of course, attorneys are very closer observing this development. And with these delegates are sent to discuss and deliberate with Mazi Nnamdi Kanu on further a line of actions and to hear directly from him. Of course, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu will never disappoint you when it comes to issues of conveying his mind, and when he has the opportunity, of course, to an important audience at the Congress, U.S. congressmen and delegations sent to deliberate and discuss with him. Eventually, he will finish the job at that particular time. So he's somebody that could be trusted. I mean, he is sound and well articulate. In fact, he's burning within his bones. And when he has the opportunity to pour out his frustration and disappointment over his ordeal, definitely he will surpass the expectations of his critics. Honestly, I bet you with that. So something is about to happen. It's just a matter of perhaps days, weeks, or months. Nobody knows. But whether there is a dramatic turn of events, nobody could deny it any further. Some people might say it's a propaganda fault. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu even went further. Of recent, of course, within the day, the week, just the last week, filed a 500 million suit against the Nigerian Medical Association for what he considers as falsification and of his health status. He was not examined. There was no any test or clinical examination that was run or carried out, and yet they have to concoct and present a fake report about the state of his head. That is another indictment. Possibly the Nigerian Medical Association or those involved in this conspiracy might also be receiving sanctions, international sanctions. You know the implication of that? Fabricating lies based on falsehoods under oath. It is rather unfortunate when the motor show directed by the court order, they should carry out an independent, thorough investigation on the state of Nnamdi Kanu head. They went and concocted and fabricated whatever they think could cover up the lies and the rest of them, or the plan to carry out certain scripts, as Nnamdi Kanu and his legal counsel have expressed. Of course, finally was exposed. And that is just the case. So everything almost is about collapsing at the same time with all this evidence and arguments presented. And of course, things will not remain the same. Something is about to happen, and that is the would be to the widest celebration of the Biafran people. Victory and deliverance is on the way. Of course, Nnamdi Kanu cannot be jailed by a repeat law. You know, of recent, Nigeria considered the attorney of the Canada, which happens to be an ally of the United States of America, considered APC, the ruling party, as a terrorist organization. You know what that implies? If the ruling party is a terrorist organization, invariably or by extension, they consider the entire Nigerian entity as have fallen under the control and the hands of the terrorists. And the government of Nigeria was expected to possibly file a suit against the Canadian government and the rest of them to remedy or to redeem their in public image in the international communities. They are yet to do that for whatever reasons best known to them. We've not seen such reactions coming from on the part of the Nigerian government. But one thing we must not deny is there are bases, of course, that was factored in. There are issues that were factored in to have arrived at that particular time, and those issues could not be denied, of course, by the Nigerian government or those who have benefited from such flawed system, indeed. So you cannot in any way look at what the US is saying. Look at what the Pope is saying about the situation of Nigeria. You can't dismiss all these things. These are what power. They knew what they are saying, and they have made research and investigations, of course, to have come up with such position. So such cannot be dismissed. And with the current happenings, look at the killings of even Nigerian soldiers. Execution of Nigerian soldier that was captured in the course of ambush, and the rest of them, they carted away with the ammunitions and the rest of them, the armor tanks, and they tied them, their legs, and they executed them, shot them at very close range. You know what that means? They were slaughtered like animals and the rest of them. So all these things are affirming and giving credence to the weight of Nnamdi Kanu letter to the United States, and with the current designation of Nigeria as country of particular concern, just as Pope John Paul, the new Pope, of course, has also acknowledged that Nigeria is a country where Christians are being persecuted for their faith in Christ. We have churches and Christian populations are being persecuted. And in those letters, one of the items, of course, emphasized was that the Judo-Christian population of the eastern region are targets of extinction, are targets of genocidal conspiracy. It is an interesting moment, honestly, and I know, of course, no power has the right to convict a man presumed innocent, tried and discharged by a competent court of law within the Nigerian legal jurisprudence, and which has also acknowledged his extraordinary rendition and considered that illegal. and have said on this basis that no court, including Omotosho, has no right to even preside over Mazi Nnamdi Kanu case, let alone conspiring to jail him or to sentence him. On what basis? On the basis of illegality and criminality. It is rather unfortunate. Let's have your own take regarding this development. Definitely, there is wider jubilation. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has done the magic, and indeed is speaking up, and no one can deny it. James Omotosho has been taken aback and proceeded to the Supreme Court to correct the error, what he considered the error in giving interpretation or judgment to refer Mazi Nnamdi Kanu case that had been concluded by an appellate court of law back to the High Court using a dead law. It is quite a very embarrassing development, honestly, but Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has ambushed both the Supreme Court, which is the conscience of the country, and the international world are about to watch what is about to unfold. Definitely, there is victory for the Biafran people and everyone who believes in the cause of freedom and defense of human dignity. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu will definitely have that justice. The international community has stepped in, and you know what that means. And those considerations, despite the fact that his 8 prayers was not granted by James Omotosho, but this one involving Donald Trump, the U.S. government, definitely more considerations and decisive actions will be taken swiftly, as a matter of fact. Let's have your own take regarding this development. What do you think about this recent development and unfolding surrounding Mazi Nnamdi Kanu continue incarceration and perceived denial of justice? Thanks for watching. The High Court has no power, has no jurisdiction to upturn the verdict of the appeal court. So Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is saying, establish the precedents for which you want to try me after gross violation of my fundamental rights and privileges. And you know what this delegation implies? Some people might say, that does not mean anything. You know, when the US acknowledge that petition or letter, you see, it carries weight and so many issues bordering on the persecutions of Christians. Just as recent, you saw what the position of Pope, the recent Pope 14, Pope Leo 14, or yes, have acknowledged that Christians have been persecuted in Nigeria. You know, for Pope to have acknowledged among other African nations like Mozambique, Bangladesh, and the rest of them, Sudan, you know, that in Nigeria, there is ongoing persecution of Christians. That is to tell you that it has gotten to the level that nobody could deny anymore. So with this tempo and, of course, momentum gathering over surrounding the killings and persecutions of Christians, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu seized the opportunity to write to Donald J. Trump, citing clearly his ordeals, his sufferings, and purported intimidations and persecutions as a result of professing Judeo-Christian faith, and which they have been persecuted. So the dedication to the Mazi Nnamdi Kanu to discuss about very secret, important subject as it borders on his recommendations and requests of setting up an independent inquiry, and also conducting and supervising a referendum for the Eastern people or the Biafrans to exit the Nigerian state. Certainly, the government of Nigeria must be on their toes